The streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalk as Officer Daniels patrolled the quiet neighborhood. It was just another uneventful night, or so he thought. That's when he spotted her, a little girl sitting alone on the curb, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. Her head was bowed, her hair messy, and her small frame shivered against the cool night air. Something about her didn't sit right. Where were her parents? Why was she all alone this late? Daniels parked his cruiser and approached cautiously, careful not to startle her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" The girl looked up slowly, her wide, tear-filled eyes locking with his. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared as if deciding whether to trust him. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said words that froze him in place. "He made me do all this." Daniel's mind raced. Who was he? What had she been made to do? The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut, and he knew this was no ordinary case. Whatever had happened, this little girl needed his help fast. Daniel stayed kneeling, trying to keep his voice calm, even though his chest felt tight. "Who's sweetheart? Who made you do what?" The girl glanced around nervously, gripping her teddy bear tighter. Her small hands trembled, and she leaned in closer, as if afraid someone might hear. I can't say it here," she whispered, her voice shaky. "He'll know." The officer's instincts kicked in. Whoever he was, the girl was terrified of him. "Okay," Daniel said softly. "You don't have to say anything right now. Let's just get you somewhere safe." He offered her his hand, but she hesitated, her eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting someone to appear. "Promise you'll keep me safe?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniels nodded firmly. "I promise." As they walked toward the patrol car, she finally spoke again, her words spilling out in fragments. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He said no one would get hurt. I didn't know what else to do." Her words made Daniel's stomach twist. What had this little girl been caught up in? And who was the man she was so afraid of? He knew the answers weren't going to be easy, and they were probably just the beginning of something much bigger. Daniels kept a close eye on the girl as they drove to the station. She sat in the passenger seat, her tiny hands gripping the seatbelt strap as though it might hold her together. Every so often, her eyes flickered to the side mirror, watching the dark streets behind them. It was clear she thought someone might be following. "Can you tell me your name?" Daniels asked gently, hoping to ease her fear. She hesitated for a moment, then said Leela. Her voice was so soft, he almost missed it. "All right, Leela," Daniels replied. "You're safe with me now. No one's going to hurt you." But even as he said the words, he couldn't ignore the questions swirling in his mind. What had she been made to do? Why was she out here alone? And who was the person she was so desperate to escape from? When they arrived at the station, Daniels led her to a quiet room where she could sit and warm up. Leela's eyes scanned every corner, her fear still evident. "He's not going to find me here, right?" she asked. Daniels crouched down to meet her gaze. "Not here, Leela. You're safe." She nodded but didn't seem convinced. Then, as if deciding to trust him, she added something that made his blood run cold. "It's not just me he's after. There are others." Daniels froze. This was bigger than he had imagined, and time was running out. Daniels felt a chill crawl down his spine at Leela's words. "Others?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Leela nodded, clutching her teddy bear like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "He made us all do things," she whispered, her voice cracking. "If we didn't listen, bad things would happen." Daniels leaned in, lowering his voice. "Leela, I need you to tell me more. Who is this man? What does he want?" She looked down, her fingers tracing the stitching on her bear. He's everywhere. He has cameras, people who watch for him. We couldn't get away. No one could. Her words sent a wave of unease through Daniels. Whoever he was, this wasn't just one person's nightmare. It was organized, calculated. Daniel stepped out of the room briefly and called for backup, briefing his team while keeping Leela's name out of it. Whatever this operation was, they needed to act fast. When he returned, Leela had drawn something on a napkin. A crude map with landmarks she recognized. "This is where we were kept," she said, pointing to an old factory on the edge of town. Daniel studied it, his jaw tightening. He knew the place, abandoned for years, but not forgotten. "Leela," he said, "we're going to stop him. But I need you to stay here where it's safe." She shook her head violently. "No, you don't understand. If you go there, he'll know. He always knows." Her warning hung heavy in the air, but Daniels had no choice. Lives were at stake, and he was about to walk straight into the heart of it. Daniels studied the map Leela had drawn, every line etched with desperation. He knew he was walking into dangerous territory, but he couldn't shake the urgency in her voice. Before leaving, he reassured her again, promising she'd be safe at the station. Leela's wide eyes followed him as he left, her grip on the teddy bear tighter than ever. As he drove toward the abandoned factory, Daniels couldn't ignore the strange feeling creeping over him. The quiet streets seemed too quiet, and the factory loomed like a dark shadow on the edge of town. His radio crackled to life, a call from another officer. "Daniels, we've been looking into the area. Reports say strange activity's been noticed there for months. Be careful, something feels off." Daniels parked his car a safe distance away and approached on foot. The factory was eerily silent, the air thick with tension. He found an unlocked side door and stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The place was empty, or so it seemed. But then he noticed something, faint footprints in the dust, leading toward a staircase. As he followed the trail, a sudden noise made him freeze. A soft, muffled cry. Someone was here. Daniel's heart pounded as he moved closer, his instincts on high alert. He opened a door at the end of the hallway and found a small room with a single chair and a recording device left running. The voice on the tape made his stomach drop. "You're too late, Officer Daniels. Did you really think she came to you by accident?" The realization hit him like a freight train. This wasn't a rescue, it was a trap. Daniel's heart raced as the voice on the recording continued calm and mocking. "You've been chasing shadows, officer. She led you right where I wanted." The realization hit hard. Leela wasn't just a victim. She was part of it. But why? Suddenly, footsteps echoed from behind. Daniel spun around, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. A figure stepped into the beam of light. It was Leela, clutching her teddy bear. But something was different now. Her tear-streaked face was calm, her eyes cold. "I told you he always knows," she said softly, her voice devoid of fear. Daniel stared, his mind scrambling to piece it together. "Leela, what is this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing a second figure emerging from the shadows, a man with a cruel smile. "Welcome, Officer Daniels," the man said. "We've been expecting you." Daniels reached for his radio, but the man raised a hand. "Oh, I wouldn't do that. You see, you've already been recorded trespassing on private property. And that factory fire 2 weeks ago. Well, let's just say evidence of your involvement might mysteriously surface." Before Daniels could respond, backup sirens sounded in the distance. The man's smirk faltered. "Looks like your friends showed up after all," Daniels said, his voice steady now. He had tipped off his team before entering. The operation was over, but Daniels couldn't shake the unease. Leela had been a victim once, but now she was something else entirely. Somewhere out there, she was still running, and Daniels knew their paths might cross again. As the dawn broke, the factory was surrounded by police cars, their lights cutting through the early morning haze. Daniels watched as the man was loaded into the back of a squad car, his defiant smirk finally gone. The operation had been a success in the eyes of the department, but Daniels couldn't shake the weight on his chest. He walked back through the quiet factory, his flashlight grazing over the abandoned room where Leela had stood. Her words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, he always knows asterisk, what had led her to this? Was it fear? Manipulation? Or had she been lost in ways he couldn't yet understand? Back at the station, the other officers congratulated him on dismantling what appeared to be a network exploiting vulnerable children. But Daniels wasn't celebrating. He sat at his desk, staring at the crude map Leela had drawn. It felt more like a goodbye than a clue now. He knew Leela had slipped through the cracks again, but this time, something was different. She had a chance to make a choice, and he hoped, deep down, she would choose a better path. As he left the station, he glanced at the rising sun. The case was closed, but for Daniels, the story was far from over.